Hello, this video is going to take you through setting up an elency-config server. Currently there are three ways of doing this. This is all further detailed in the server readme. Full details around server setup, configuration and what the server has to offer. Basically one way is to download a zip file of the node.js source code and create a configuration and install node.js and bring the server up yourself. The alternative ways is to use Docker containers in a Kubernetes world. This demo is going to take you through that process. There's two ways of injecting configuration. We're going to go down one route using files. The other way is to get the content yourself from files and exposing environment variables and inject them into the running Docker container. So let's get started. So elency-config server stores all its data in MongoDB. Ideally, in a production environment, your Mongo cluster will be secured using credentials or any other security mechanisms. And ideally, your server would also be locked down over HTTPS using security certificates. So currently I don't have any running MongoDB server, so I'm going to create a MongoDB container in Docker. So I'm going to run it on port 27017 and pull down the Mongo image from the Docker hub or main Docker repository. So if I start that running, open robo-mongo and connect, you'll see I have a Mongo instance running with no databases. So next steps are we're going to have to create the configuration for the elency-config server. Now usually this would be a kind of one-off thing. It's rare the configuration may change unless you for some reason had to change your Mongo URLs or tweak some other config, but this would usually be a kind of one-off process and you'll follow your company's security practices in terms of where you store that configuration. So ideally you would lock it away somewhere using Vault or some secure storage mechanism and only expose it to approved parties, people. So let's just quickly take you through what configuration needs creating. So I've got a load of prompts or scripts to tell me what to do, prompt my memory, but basically a few encryption mechanisms are used in the elency-config server. One is public and private PEM keys. So if we just run this simple bash script, you will see that within this configuration folder, that's just spat out a public and private key. And then if we look here, I need to create a config.json file. All these settings are further detailed in the server readme, but basically there's a Mongo URL, 36 character base 64 encoded string for creating authorization keys. But the key one here for this demo is run over HTTP, because we won't be sitting behind an Nginx proxy or something that can stick a SSL certificate in front of our site. We don't want to create secure certificates because they won't be persisted in the browser, so we set run over HTTP to true. So let's initially create a config.json file. And then step four is to create, or step three even, is to create a keys JSON file with a config encryption key. So essentially this defines an encryption key to encrypt the config JSON but they'll also this actual file will be encrypted using the PEM keys. So if we run this bash script here, which has some environment variables, but also calls this node script to encrypt, you'll see that. So basically, we've got a public and private PEM keys, but we've now got a config JSON and a keys JSON that are encrypted. So as I said, ideally these would be secured and stored somewhere in a secure location. Ideally, you probably want to store the raw content or decrypt the encrypted content if you want to edit and change your configuration. So we now have the configuration ready. So essentially, step 5 is to copy our configuration files, which you may download when launching a server. You'll download from your secure location and put the config files in a folder ready to launch your server. So if we run the script, you'll see that within this Docker folder there's now a configuration underscore files folder which contains the configuration. And step 6 is the config YAML, the Docker compose YAML, which is used to bring up the running Docker container. So I can create that file. You'll see it's pulling down an image from the Docker hub for the config server, and there's a volume mapping from a local configuration files folder, which is this one, which maps through to a similar folder inside the Docker container, and the server is exposed on port 3000. So if we now launch the server, you'll see that the server's come up and is listening on port 3000. You'll also see that this folder has become empty because when the container starts, it copies this configuration across and then deletes it from the source. You'll also see a new database created in Mongo. This has a number of collections. And lastly, we should be able to browse to the config server itself, which we can, which is now up and running. That's basically a brief intro into bringing up a server. More tutorials will be to follow in terms of how to use the actual admin console and consume configuration using clients.